What is up, guys? Welcome to a brand new episode of the D-Pad Connect podcast. I am your host, George, and as always, we have a bunch of nerdy news to get into, specifically gaming related, just because E3 has just concluded as of June 15th, yesterday, with Nintendo pretty much wrapping up the festivities. But before we get into anything, and I let you know what today's topics are going to be, just remember that you can always find us on YouTube under D-Pad Connect. Make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. It helps us out a ton. We love to see the interactions that we get with our community, especially on our community page on our Facebook. And you can find us under D-Pad Connect, which would be great to have you join us. So go ahead and find us on Facebook under D-Pad Connect, and you can join our little community there where we put up polls and let you guys know what we're going to be talking about. We also interact with many of the people there. And we also have the privilege of just discussing things like E3, which we just did. So also remember that you can always find us on Anchor. Anchor seems to be the main place where you can get our podcast on time. Now, as I stated in our Facebook post maybe a few days ago, for some reason when we upload to Anchor, Spotify takes a few days to also update. So just remember that if you want to get everything up to date as soon as we publish a brand new episode of the podcast, make sure that you go to anchor.com. You can even get the app on your Android, on your Apple, on your satellite phone if you still have one of those. But make sure that you go to anchor.com and you go ahead and subscribe to our podcast. That would be awesome to have you subscribe there. And also you can always you can follow us on Spotify and also Google Podcasts, which is pretty cool. So we always have those links up whenever we upload our YouTube videos or we post it on our Facebook pages. So make sure that you look out for those links if you're trying to subscribe or follow a specific type of podcast distributor. So we have lots to get into today. That's our little rigmarole that we usually open up with. But I am going to give you my final impressions on Ratchet and Clank. I did platinum it. I am very proud of myself. And I am very happy to say that I think Ratchet and Clank is one of my game of the years. Years. So it's definitely up there for being a game of the year contender for me. And I'll get into that in just a bit. And also, we have to talk about our E3 aftermath, or E3 endgame, as I like to call it. We're going to talk about the good. We're going to talk about the bad. And there's really no in between this year. E3 was just, it was weird coming after a pandemic to have E3 again. While it was a pleasant surprise, it's still something that lacked in certain areas, and then it shined in certain areas. So we're going to definitely get into that. So let me go ahead and open up with my thoughts on Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart on the PlayStation 5. Let me tell you guys, I tweeted this out after I beat the game and I platinumed it. And I have to say that this game kept a smile on my face as if I was a 14-year-old again. I remember getting a PlayStation 2 very late into the PlayStation 2 cycle, and remembering that the first game I was going to go get was Ratchet and Clank because I was big on platformers at the time. I really enjoy playing those types of games, especially Ratchet and Clank kind of scratched that itch of exploration alongside weapons and just upgrade systems that I really enjoyed. And the very first Ratchet and Clank game holds a very special place in my heart, and it became one of my favorite series to play on the PlayStation after that. And really going into Rift Apart, I was truly excited because having a brand new console, it's tough because you don't get too many big games out immediately. It takes some time. We're not even a year into the PlayStation 5 cycle, and we've gotten a few good things, but Ratchet and Clank was definitely always on my radar as soon as it got announced. And let me tell you, I'm not going to do it any justice because I can't get into any spoilers or anything, but the magic that it captures, it feels like you're playing a Pixar movie, which I think a lot of other people say, but it really is one of those games that just has that magic to it. And Insomniac is really they've just become one of my favorite developers. They really have. Insomniac has knocked it out the park with Spider-Man, with Miles Morales, and they've also knocked it out the park with Ratchet and Clank, which is it's their bread and butter. It's their baby, right? They create this game, and they give these games such a special feel. And it was very few and far between moments here and there where certain entries into the series kind of were lackluster and ended up falling short. But with Rift Apart, man, the weapon system, And let me tell you, this game was definitely made for the PS5 with the SSD load times, how rifts open and you go into the rifts and the world loads automatically. It's instantaneous. There's no lag. Playing the game in 4K 60 frames per second or playing it in performance RT, which is pretty much what I would say is the best in between that you can play it in, which is performance, which is the 60 frames per second. My apologies, 30 frames per second is for 4K, but the performance RT does 60 frames per second, and it also gives you that ray tracing quality. So whatever you like in 4K is made up in all of the colors and the vibrancy that pops out when playing this game. And Rift Apart, I platinumed it. It took me about 4 days to platinum it. I would have probably platinumed it sooner if it weren't for Just Life. But it was one of those games that, just like Resident Evil Village, kept me hooked until the very end. And I was able to just enjoy every minute of it. The character progression, the story itself, it's not trying to tell a Last of Us caliber type story. But for a Ratchet and Clank game, I really enjoyed this story. I love Rivet. Oh man, I love Rivet. Seeing another Lombax. I mean, I know we've had that moment happen a few times within the series, specifically a Crack in Time when you met another Lombax as well. And for those of you guys that don't know, Ratchet is the only Lombax within his universe. The rest of his species is in a different reality, and that's something that they kind of touch on within this game. But him meeting Rivet, Clank, a few other characters that I can't get into because they haven't been shown in the trailers, but they are a big part of the game. And it's pretty surprising because you don't expect it and then it happens. But Dr. Nefarious, I mean, the villains are just great. They're always there for comedic value, but they always live up to the hype. And I really enjoyed this game. I loved the worlds. I loved, like I said, the weapons. The weapons, a lot of them are memorable. They kind of come back from old entries, and some of them are just new and they're just amazing. And I think this is the first time I played a Ratchet and Clank game and I used every weapon evenly. Not only because I needed to get specific trophies, but also because I really enjoyed every single weapon in its own right. I loved mixing and matching. I loved having my own type of different combinations, whether it was the Mr. Zircon type weapon, which is Mr. Fungi, which is it's a pretty interesting weapon. Once you upgrade it, it's pretty funny hearing him talk. He's not Mr. Zircon. He's not Mr. Zircon. I will never give anybody that place. Because one, Mr. Zircon will come hunt me down. Or two, his family will. Because as you guys know, when you upgrade Mr. Zircon, he turns into the Zircon family, which you actually see them in this game in a different capacity. It's actually pretty funny. There's actually a little robot that you get that allows you to learn their history after all of the other games and why they've switched their roles within this game and why they're no longer a weapon. And I think it's actually pretty hilarious that they're starting their own life. And, I don't want to get any more into it. It's not really a spoiler, but, Zirky, Zircon Jr., pretty much, he has his own way of just doing things, and he has his own little battle arena, and Mrs. Zircon sells you the weapons in the game, so that's pretty cool. And then out of everything, when you go to Zirky's, when you go to his battle arena, Mr. Zircon is actually the bartender. So that's a pretty good family business, I might say. And I can talk on and on about these different characters that I've fallen in love with throughout the years and throughout different entries. But it's really one of those games that just captures the magic of playing on next gen. And I think, in my own personal opinion, it's the first game that uses all of the capabilities fully of the PlayStation 5. With the DualSense, when you're using specific weapons, you kind of get that feedback. You feel like you're actually pulling a trigger, and then you get that feedback from the rattling of using like a machine gun type weapon. Or you get the charge up weapon where if you press halfway it does one thing, and then if you press it down all the way it does another. So I think they made really good use of the DualSense functionality. And like I said, the SSD, that's just something you can see in the trailers. And then just the 4K. I played for the first time. I usually just jump to Performance RT, but I really wanted to see every single world in 4K. And it was one of the first things that I did. I just played in 4K, 30 frames per second. My eyes eventually got used to it because I'm used to playing in 60 frames per second whenever I can. And I think God of War did a really good job at doing the 4K at 60 frames. It makes it run smooth. The colors were still popping. The environments were still lush. They were still great. Kratos looked amazing. I wish I had his biceps and his body, but one day, I guess, whenever I evolve into full dad bod. But it's one of those things that it's one of those games that really, 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 if you get the chance to get a PS5, which is extremely hard at this point, and I get it. Some of us were a little bit luckier than others, but I totally understand. It's one of those games that I would recommend to somebody immediately. Immediately. It would be alongside the Miles Morales. It would obviously be alongside some of the more upgraded games that were released on PS4. But I think that Demon Souls and Ratchet and Clank right now really, really just take the cake for me. And I'm looking forward to see what else Sony releases, especially when Horizon Forbidden West arrives to our consoles. It's going to be a PS4 game as well, but I'm definitely looking forward to seeing how that translates to using the power of the PS5. So if you didn't get it, or if you didn't notice while I was talking about it, I love Rift Apart. I loved everything about it. For me, it's a 9 out of 10. I don't give it a 10 out of 10 because obviously there were a few glitches here and there, which was kind of surprising. There was one moment where in collecting all of the gold bolts, there's these mini games called glitch mini games, that's what I call them, but she's called glitch. And you'll see if you ever play the game what you kind of do. But it's just these little mini games where you go around attacking different viruses. And for some reason, the game, after you finish it, it's supposed to just end there. And it let me play it a second time, but it gave me the trophy for finishing all of the glitch segments, mini games. But then it locked me out of getting a different golden bolt on a different planet that required me to play the glitch game because the system thought that I had already completed everything. So I had to reboot to an old save state and kind of go from there. That was the only pain in the butt that I experienced in playing this game, which is why I will give it a 9 out of 10 because it did have that one hiccup and maybe like a few other hitches, but it's nothing that'll distract you from actually playing the game fully. If you actually go on Insomniac's Twitter, you'll find that they've been really responsive in talking to the audience and to their crowd pretty much, and letting them know that, hey, they're on top of it. And they even opened up a support link where you can actually tweet at them and let them know what it is that you're experiencing, and they actually gave you either recommendations on the spot or they'd let you know if they were working on that for a patch. So great to know. Insomniac is one of my favorite developers. I think they're up there for me alongside Sony Santa Monica and Atlas, of course, because I love Persona. So I think they do really good. And it's just, you can tell just the love and care that they put into it. And I loved Rift Apart. Excuse me. So if you have a PS5 and you have one game that you want to play to experience everything that the PS5 has to offer, that's the game I'm going to recommend to you. That is the game I am going to recommend to you. So, moving on to our next topic, which is probably going to consume the rest of this podcast, guys. I'm not even going to lie to you. The rest of this podcast is going to be the E3 aftermath that we got to experience throughout this whole weekend and these last few days. Of course, everything started on Saturday, but we'll get into that. I got a lot to say about Gearbox, trust me. And we had Sunday, which was really, I would say, the start of E3, with Xbox and Bethesda having their conference, and then a few others afterward. And then we had, I think the icing on the cake really became Nintendo on Tuesday. So in between, there were little ones that I'm not going to lie, guys, I didn't pay attention to everything because not everything calls out to me. But Xbox and Nintendo definitely had some things that I looked up and that I've been following since their announcements. And I really enjoyed seeing a few of their things. And we're going to get into the good first, and then we'll get into the bad, because trust me, the bad is going to be a rant-filled moment for me, especially when it comes to Nintendo. So the good, of course, Xbox, I think, had a really good showing. We know that Sony has pulled out of E3 a few years now in a row, and we know that they've been kind of sticking to doing their state of plays whenever they get a moment or a chance to talk about new games. From what we know from Sony at the moment, I'll preface this section of E3 talk with this, and it's that according to Herman Holtz, who's the head of Sony at the moment, he said there's 26 studios working on games. Or there's 26 games in development, if I'm not mistaken, is what he said. So I'm looking forward to see what those 26 things are. Because Sony definitely has to speak about something. We know that God of War is not coming this year. We know that Horizon is coming this year, and we just had that state of play. And if you want to hear my thoughts on that, go to our very first episode. But it's it's a very pivotal moment because Xbox had a great showing. And I know that some of us here at D-Pad, we're definitely upset with the whole Bethesda deal. And we'll get into Starfield in a bit. And I know there's a specific person on our crew here who is not too happy. And I don't blame him because he's been waiting for a while. But Xbox had such a good showing. They had such a good showing. Xbox is totally redeeming themselves. They're not running things like they did for the Xbox One. They're not sitting on their soapbox. They're not sitting there trying to make moves to try to make up time for lost, or make up for lost time in this console war, which I don't really care about console wars. I know we get kind of territorial about things and we get very fanboyish at times. I tend to lean more towards playing on my PlayStation, and I've always been more of a PlayStation user, but I've always enjoyed Xbox, and I actually own a Series S as well. So I enjoy Game Pass because it's one of those things that allows me not to have to spend the 70 or the $60 on a game for a console that I'm using for exclusives, but I'm also using for little things that I don't want to play on my PS5. So Game Pass, straight out of the gate, Xbox announced that a lot of these big games coming out this year, like Back 4 Blood and Halo Infinite, a lot of these games are going straight to Game Pass. And for Back 4 Blood, that's even more important because it's a PS5 console title as well and a PlayStation 4 title, and both of those are going to be full price. So Sony isn't doing anything about these third parties that are launching this year and that people are pretty much going to get for $15 a month on Xbox, and it'll allow them to try it, and if they don't like it, guess what? They just move on. They didn't spend $70 on a one game. They spent $15 to try it out. So Game Pass is such a great investment, especially for somebody like me. But Xbox, for Xbox, it's funny because I've never really cared about Halo as much. I know Halo's always been their flagship title, especially, going back to Xbox, to the original Xbox, to the big boy, the giant, the one that you needed the giant hands for to play the remote. I remember having one of those, I forget what they call it, but that was a pretty big controller. I'm pretty sure I could use that as a plate or something, but it was a pretty big controller. And I remember going and playing Halo for the first time, and Halo never really resonated with me. I was always more of a Gears person once Gears arrived on the Xbox 360. But this time around, I'm looking at Halo Infinite, and I started watching a video on the history of all of the Halos, just like the stories all, meshed together. And man, Halo Infinite is really getting my attention this time around. So Halo Infinite, I watched the trailer, the story trailer. I'm a little bit familiar with obviously with Master Chief as the main character, but I'm a little bit familiar with Cortana and a few of the other characters and some of the story beats. But I will say that I think I'm really going to play Halo Infinite, and I'm going to play a Halo game from the very beginning for the first time at launch. And I'm looking forward to that later this year. They're looking at a holiday 2021 release for that. And I can't wait. I have Game Pass. I might as well go for it, right? It won't hurt. If I don't like it, I don't like it. I didn't spend $70 on it. So see, that's where Game Pass is. And I know that's a Xbox, that's a Microsoft studio, it's a first party. But it's going to be the same case for when I try Back 4 Blood. I already told my buddies, I said, listen, I'm not even going to bother buying it on the PlayStation 5 unless it goes on a deep sale, because it's not worth it to me to just try this game not knowing if I'm even going to like it. So Halo Infinite, I'm definitely looking forward to that on Game Pass. Another game coming to Game Pass at launch the day before my birthday, which is great, August 25th, is Psychonauts 2. Another little game, right? And I know that Double Fine has been around for quite some time, but I know that this is going to be one of those games that I'm going to have the luxury to just play. And once again, although it's arriving on the PS5, it's a game that I don't have to pay full price for unless it's on a deep sale once again. So I'm looking forward to playing something small like Psychonauts 2, which has a weird, kooky story. The first one I didn't really beat, so I might go back to that on Game Pass if I'm not mistaken. I think I also own it on PlayStation. So I might try that out and try to see if I can kind of get into this story. But it's one of those games that, hey, once again, it's worth a try. I can get it for pretty much, I can rent it for free pretty much because I'm paying only $15 a month. So Psychonauts 2. Another one that me and some of the guys here at D-Pad actually really enjoyed is the Outer Worlds 2. And I think their trailer was one of the best parts to that. They were really making fun of how these first party and third party games get these ridiculous over the top trailers that try to make them seem like something they're not, because once the game arrives, which the narrator in the trailer actually made a really good point. They showed a really crazy looking monster, and the narrator goes, "You see this monster here? Well, say goodbye, because you're not going to see him after this trailer. He's going to be gone." But how true is that? How true is it, especially in these past few years? Let's consider Cyberpunk. Let's consider No Man's Sky, even though Hello Games has completely redeemed themselves. So I'm not even going to throw them under the bus. They've already gotten enough flack, and I think they've already redeemed themselves completely. They're doing a great job of No Man's Sky now to make it be the thing that they advertised in the first place. But let's just consider these types of situations. And then you have Outer Worlds here, who's pretty much spoofing them all and letting people know, like, hey, yeah, this is the part where you hear that sound, and it's all this crazy symphonic music arriving to show a main character that isn't even in final production, as the narrator says. So the Outer Worlds 2, I played the Outer Worlds 1. It's actually a really good game. I really recommend it. It's from Obsidian. If you love New Vegas, you'll love this game. It's in space. The monsters were unique. The story was unique. I didn't beat it. I got pretty far in it. But it was a game that for the first time really kind of captured me, because I'm not big on Fallout. I tend to get into Fallout for maybe a few hours. I think the most I've put into Fallout is maybe about 40 hours. I don't even get that deep into it. Kind of lose interest fairly quick. But the Outer Worlds really got my attention right out of the gate. I actually was really intrigued to play as a smooth talking shooter. So I did a pretty good job at lying, cheating, and stealing my way up to the top. So, from what I played of the game, and I was pretty far into it. I think the game's only about 30 hours, so I was pretty close to the end. Shame on me, I never finished it, but I think a lot of us here at D-Pad haven't finished it either, but it was a really good game. I really enjoyed the Outer Worlds, and once again, there's that comparison to New Vegas, because Obsidian made New Vegas for Bethesda, and they developed it, and I really think if you love New Vegas and if you love the Fallout series, the Outer Worlds, you're right at home. And I think what's even more ironic is that the Outer Worlds was supposed to be kind of like and I'm not saying, this is me speaking now, but I feel like it was kind of like a shot at Bethesda, like, hey, we don't need that raggedy system, which, let me tell you, Bethesda has that raggedy system that they keep implementing into Fallout, into Elder Scrolls, and I'm really hoping Starfield, which we're going to talk about in a few, I really hope Starfield does not use that system. That was one of the turnoffs for me, just the clunkiness. Just, you'll be talking to somebody and he's like fusing through the wall, or he's in the wall stuck, and you're like, where is this guy? And his name tags on the wall. Or you're trying to get a quest and he keeps repeating himself, or just random things that happen. But it's even more ironic that now Microsoft not only owns Obsidian, but they also pretty much own Bethesda. So now you have Fallout and the Outer Worlds under the same banner, which, once again, I don't know what Sony's going to do to respond to these type of games, because these games are popular. The Outer Worlds probably not as much as Fallout. We'll have to see how Fallout and Elder Scrolls pan out when it comes to exclusivity, but it's going to be one of those things that only time will tell. It's just going to be one of those battles. So, Outer Worlds 2, I'm looking forward to it. Another one that I really enjoyed watching the trailer to was Redfall, which is coming out in summer of 2022, and it was from Arcane Studios. Arcane Studios is responsible for making actually one of my favorite stealth games, which is Dishonored. And funny enough, it's the first stealth game that I'm able to play aggressively. I think one of the first things I always invest in is in being able to sneak up behind somebody and get rid of them. But if you've played Dishonored, you understand that there's certain You can't leave a lot of bodies around, obviously, for obvious reasons. You're playing; it's a stealth game. But on top of that, there's that in the first Dishonored, there was consequences for leaving too many bodies around, where there was this plague, and the rats would kind of become more prominent, and the plague would become more prominent, depending on how many bodies you left behind. So I always made sure to invest in skills that allowed me to disintegrate a body whenever I took them out, which I think was the best thing for me. So I really fell in love with the game. I really enjoyed the story. I think the story is very intriguing. The second one was pretty good. I think the first one really got its hooks in me, but I think the second one was really good. I loved playing as Emily, and I loved just everything about it. But that's enough about Dishonored. Arcane Studios, who's responsible for Dishonored, and who's also responsible for Deathloop, which is coming to the PlayStation 5. Let's see how long that's going to be exclusive for, but they're making this game Redfall, and it looks like Left 4 Dead mixed with supernatural powers, and you're hunting vampires. And if I'm not mistaken, I think it's in Massachusetts, so that's pretty cool. But if you watch the trailer, which I recommend you do, and it could be playing actually at this moment maybe, but if not, I recommend that you watch it on YouTube. It's really intriguing. There's no gameplay to it, of course. It's just a story-based trailer where they kind of show you some of the powers that some of the characters have and how they're able to kind of use them, and the enemies and the cultists that you're fighting. You're mainly fighting vampires, so you're kind of fighting these different types of vampires. And it's going to be a team shooter from what it looks like. So I'm intrigued to see how that pans out. But overall, I think it's a really good entry to Arcane's catalog. And I think it's also going to do very well just being exclusive to Microsoft because, once again, Game Pass. It's coming to Game Pass. So, nothing to lose. I already said enough about that. So, for those of us that have an Xbox that want to try Redfall, I think that'll be pretty cool. I'm looking forward to it. I'm definitely looking forward to it. It's intriguing. It's, maybe a weekend game where you can kind of play with some people if you have friends on Xbox. I do not, unfortunately. I think it's just me and my little cousin. So I'll have to find some friends. But 2022, maybe I'll find some friends by then. And I'll be able to enjoy some Redfall with them. And then last but not least is Starfield. Man, what can we say about Starfield? What can we say about Starfield? So Starfield is a game that was kind of bounced around, and PlayStation players really thought it was coming, and like I said, there is one specific person here at D-Pad who I can agree really was looking forward to this Skyrim in space, is what they're calling it. Starfield is releasing on 11/11/21, which, if I'm not mistaken, that was around the same time Fallout was released a few years back. And it's one of those games that has a lot of promise. The story, it wasn't a story trailer, but the trailer that they showed was interesting. It just showed a countdown, kind of like on a dash in the spaceship. They showed a few things. They showed you kind of like a little bit of the environments. They showed a mech suit walking outside on the moon, and it's really intriguing. I'm looking forward to see what they do with the story and what it's actually going to be about. If I'm not mistaken, besides it being Skyrim in space, there is a lot of talks that it's going to be still grounded in realism, even though it's going to be a sci-fi game. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they do that. Once again, it's coming to Game Pass. I can't say that enough. It's coming to Game Pass. So if you have Game Pass, you have nothing to worry about. But I'm sad for PlayStation players. I really am. And I think Pete Hines, who's one of the executives there, spoke about that to IGN, and he said how he felt because, he is a PlayStation player as well. But he understands that these are things that he has no control over, and all he can say is that he's really sorry, he feels bad. But unfortunately, that's just how the cookie crumbles, as some may say. So I'm looking forward to see how Starfield does once it's out. Hopefully we're able to get a better glimpse of it next year. I'm pretty sure it's coming out 2022, so next E3 we should be seeing something about it. So I'm looking forward to seeing how Starfield does. And once again, there's not much else I can say besides Skyrim in space sounds pretty interesting. And like I said, I'm not a big fan of the Bethesda engine that they use. I think it's really clunky. I think with all of the years they've been getting a pass, as I've spoken to some of my fellow gamers, and they've said the same, that, you know, people give them a pass because of how in-depth their games go and how rich their worlds are. And it's true. That's one thing you can't take away from them. They know how to build a world and they know how to build a story. And even when you're done with the story, there's still so much more to do in the world. How many Easter eggs haven't been found in Fallout or Skyrim or Elder Scrolls in general? So we give them a pass because of that, but I'm really hoping now, being under Microsoft's umbrella, they're able to have access to better systems, which, if I'm not mistaken, they're actually working on a better engine for a lot of their games. So we'll see how it goes from there. And we're hoping that only good things may come from this. It's still a good time to be a gamer. And I'm really hoping and I'm really rooting for all of these things to be a success, especially now that I'm a part of the Xbox and the Microsoft ecosystem. I'm really hoping to see some good things come out of it. And I'm also looking forward to playing a lot of these games on Game Pass. So the next part of E3 that I want to talk about that was, you know, pretty good. I think it brought a lot to the table. There's also some pretty bad things that I'll talk about, and bad to me. I don't know if they're going to be bad to you, but they're bad to me. But some of the good things that came out of the Nintendo Direct that we got on Tuesday the 15th were obviously the Breath of the Wild trailer that we got, the teaser, I would say, because it wasn't really a full-length trailer. 2022 is when they're saying it's in a release, so next year. But Breath of the Wild 2, if you guys know me, you guys know that Ocarina of Time is my favorite game in this series. Zelda is always going to be my favorite franchise. It's number one for me. It's my favorite game series. It's my favorite games to play. And there's obviously a fond story behind it because of the way that Ocarina of Time captured me. And really, that's the game that made me a gamer. That's the game that made me want to beat games and want to try different things out. Because before that, I was just a snot-nosed kid. But before that, I was just playing things and I would trade them in immediately. And, you know, it was that game that I remember getting it for as a graduation gift. And I remember I had gotten it thinking it was a completely different game. I don't know if I had thought it was a game that I saw my friend play. It was just very odd. I thought it was a completely different game. And from the moment I started playing that game and I started feeling like I knew how to do this, and I remember finally getting to the end of the game and beating Ganon, it just resonated with me. I remember it was like 7 or 8 in the morning, and I woke up my father to tell him that I had beaten my first game, that I beat Ocarina of Time, and I remember he gave me a high five and then went back to bed. But but it's one of those games that just, it's near and dear to my heart. So, and we're going to talk about more of that with some of the bad for Nintendo. So, Breath of the Wild 2, we got an awesome teaser. We saw some I was going to say Skyrim, some Skyward Sword-like islands floating around, which was pretty cool. I haven't done my deep dive research that I normally do with these type of teasers, and I'm looking forward to kind of dissecting what I think about it later on in the future as we get more information about it. But it's definitely, I mean, I'm obviously going to play it. I play every Zelda. I love Zelda. I just love Zelda. I think I have so many Zelda things in this room. And eventually when we start doing video, which, by the way, guys, we are going to start doing video pretty soon. Last week was our first test with all 4 of us here at D-Pad. But this time, I'm looking forward to using some video starting in the next few weeks. So looking forward to using that. But that's neither here nor there. That's just a quick parenthesis. But Breath of the Wild 2, I'm looking forward to Breath of the Wild 2. There's not much I can say. Like I said, they kind of touched on some of the stuff that we saw in the first teaser when it was announced. So they talk about, you know, they show you the dried up Ganon that looks like a raisin. They show Link's hand kind of get possessed or kind of like infected by the Blight, which is a big part of Breath of the Wild 1 because it belongs to Blight Ganon, which is, you know, the Blight Ganons that you fight in the different beasts. So it looked like that type of goo or that type of energy kind of infected his hand, and then you see kind of like this cool like forearm thing come out and kind of protect him. And then, you know, you see that a lot in the teaser, and you see him kind of using that arm as the tablet that would allow you to freeze and to make ice and do all these other things and make the bombs. So it seems like that arm is going to play a big part in this, and it gives me Twilight Princess vibes. And Twilight Princess is actually up there as being one of my favorite Zeldas. Majora's Mask is another one that's pretty good. But it definitely, I think a lot of people on the internet are making those comparisons because it looks like it's going to be a little bit darker than the usual entries we get for Zelda games. Now, Zelda games are normally bubbly in general, but I think they're doing a really good job at keeping the younger crowd engaged, but also re-engaging the adult crowd that grew up with Zelda. And I think that's not something to scoff at. I think Eiji Onuma is doing an amazing job as a director there. And I think he just has a great touch when it comes to these Zelda games. And I'm looking forward to what Breath of the Wild 2 is going to offer. I love the fact that there was a moment where it looks like Link turned into like a water drop and kind of broke into like a different platform. It was so cool. I'm doing it no justice by doing this. I recommend that you watch the trailer or you look up the teaser. But it was such a cool teaser. And I think one of the moments that reminded me of Twilight Princess as well was kind of this creepy chant that kind of pops in near the end of the trailer, which I think if you play in reverse gives you something else. Kind of sounds like those old rock records where you would play it in reverse and it had like a hidden message or something. So it's just such a great teaser. I'm looking forward to what this Zelda's going to bring. I'm really hoping the weapon durability is something that's fixed. I know I sound like a crybaby probably, but I especially for the Master Sword, I really think that was a cop-out. I can understand every other cheap weapon that you get, but how can the Master Sword just break? Or lose its power, if I'm not mistaken. You had to, in order to keep it at full strength, you had to do the trials, which I understand that. That's pretty cool. That kind of reminds me of Wind Waker, when you had to awaken the Master Sword's true power by going to those 2 temples. But overall, I think Breath of the Wild 2 is going to deliver. I don't think there's much else to say. Breath of the Wild 1 is a testament of greatness when it comes to a Zelda game that innovated and that captured a whole audience. I remember for the longest time, it was just the game that everybody had to have on the Switch. Whenever you got a Switch, that was the game you had to get. So I'm looking forward to Breath of the Wild 2. Another game that was announced is Metroid Dread, which releases on October 8th. Now, I'm not a big Metroid person. I'm slowly getting into the 2D Metroids. I played Metroid Prime quite a bit on GameCube, so I'm lying to you. I did enjoy the Metroid Prime series. I played all the way to 3. I beat all of them. I don't remember much of it. I would have to revisit, but it was definitely a challenging but fun game. I think Metroid's always been one of those series that can really, one, it reminds me of Alien, which I think there's a lot of callbacks to it in it. 2, it's a game that I think if they ever rebooted it from the ground up to be like just a horror game, I think it would do great. And Metroid Dread is a testament of that. And Metroid Dread, it's the conclusion of Samus's story, starting all the way from Metroid 1 on the Nintendo, on the NES, and it, Super Metroid, and then the Metroid Fusion games. So it concludes Samus's adventure from that perspective, because Metroid Prime, from what it seems like, seems to be its own thing. And please correct me if I'm wrong, audience, if you know more about Metroid Prime than I do. Even though I played them, I don't know exactly how the story is separate from these other 2D entries. So I'll do my research on that. But it concludes Samus's story. It seems to have horror vibes in the sense that there is an enemy that can hunt you down if he catches you. So it's very Nemesis-like or very Mr. X-like. And I think that's pretty cool. And that's what I mean, that being stuck on a space station, not knowing when this robot can find you and just instantly one-hit KO you, seems to bring a level of, quote, no pun intended, but dread over the player to really be on his P's and Q's and really stay out of the way. So it releases on October 8th. I'm definitely going to play it. I love the 2D side-scrolling games. Metroid's always been fun for that type of stuff. It's up there, obviously, with the Metroidvania category, which is Castlevania as well. And I think it made a lot of people happy. I mean, the special edition and the amiibos that got announced by them, which the robots, the stalker-type robots, are called Emmys, which I guess they are sent by the Federation from what I was reading. So it seems like Samus and the Federation are at odds from what I'm reading. And it's definitely going to be a game that for Metroid players who have been waiting for years now, are really going to be happy to go back to. Metroid 4 seems to still be in development, or Prime 4, which it was announced by one of the Nintendo executives there during the Direct. So we're still in development, so we still have to wait for more news on that. But at least in the meantime, we have Metroid Dread to kind of wrap things up. And they're in a pandemic era where the gaming industry is still recovering in the sense of production time and how much time they've had to develop everything. Although working from home, they've probably been more efficient. It's still tough not having your normal day-to-day tools to complete things on a much faster schedule. So, we wish them the best with Metroid Prime 4, but Metroid Dread is coming on October 8th once again, and I'm looking forward to playing that, especially given the fact that I don't know much about Metroid as much as I should, but it's definitely a series that's still really good. So, the last thing I'll say about Nintendo is Mario Party Superstars, coming out on October 27th, if I'm not mistaken. So, the only reason I'm mentioning this one is because of my daughter. So my daughter saw me watching a trailer for it, and immediately she looked at me and said, "Dad, I want that." And normally that's how things go in the Santiago household, but it's funny to see my kid getting into these types of games, and I think it's even cooler to see that Mario Party Superstars is bringing back maps from the N64, which is for when I started playing Mario Party. And I haven't played a Mario Party game in a while because they haven't been as great, but those Nintendo 64 ones were awesome. So I'm looking forward to diving into that with my daughter and just playing those mini games together and seeing how she enjoys them. So October 27th, Mario Party Superstars is releasing, so I'm looking forward to that as well. So those are some of the good things that I thought were good about the Nintendo Direct. There were probably good things that were good to you. Please make sure you let me know in the comments things that you enjoyed, or on the Facebook community page, let me know what you thought. But overall, everything else kind of lacked, and we're going to get into it now, and we're going to get into the bad of E3, these are my nitpicks. These are my moments that I thought were just not great. And I'm going to start with Gearbox. So Gearbox had a presentation on Saturday. And while Borderlands 3 is still fresh, we understand and know that Borderlands 3 is still progressing. It's still going to get more DLC, if I'm not mistaken. It's still I would say Gearbox still had an opportunity to do a little bit more. And it was just really pointless, in my opinion, for what they showed. Their biggest announcement had already been announced on Thursday, at Summer Games Fest, which was Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, which is a standalone game, and I'm looking forward to it. We got a few more details from the director of the game, and it's going to be like a D&D meets Borderlands, which Assault on Dragon's Keep, which was a DLC for Borderlands 2, pretty much touched on a lot of that world and how it could play out. So it's cool that we're getting a full medieval setting. There's going to be goblins, there's going to be dragons. The whole game's going to be a medieval setting. And I'm glad that we're going to get like guns and different things like that. I'm wondering if they're going to implement swords. I'm hoping they do. That'd be pretty cool. But overall, that was their biggest announcement, and it was the only thing I was looking forward to. They spoke about the Borderlands movie, but for some of you that have spoken to me, I'm not big on game movies, especially because we've been burnt so many times in the gaming community with movies attempting to recreate video games, which sometimes they don't even need a recreation. They're just their own thing, and they stand alone on their own. But Gearbox really had no business doing anything they did. They could have easily released that whole I wouldn't even call it a conference, that whole teaser of a thing that lasted about an hour, if I'm not mistaken. They could have just released those things in chunks on their YouTube page or on Facebook or something, because it really was not worth it. It wasn't worth all that hassle to have all those things. I mean, Randy Pitchford, all he pretty much spoke about was the movie, and we got to see Kevin Hart, we got to see Eli Roth, we got to see a few funny segments, but overall, it's something that unless you were going to give the Borderlands movie trailer you were going to release it for everybody to watch, or you were going to have more in-depth gameplay for Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. There was really no point. So Gearbox is my first negative for E3. It was on Saturday. I remember just watching it for like about half hour and just switching it off because at that point I just felt like there was no hope for it. So Gearbox, shame. If I can ring that shame bell from Game of Thrones, I will, and have the lady come out and everything. But it just wasn't. It didn't live up to anything. So Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, great. I'm looking forward to it, 2022. But the Borderlands movie, all right, I'll give it a chance. But other than that, I don't really care. I didn't really care about anything else. So moving on, I want to say that there was obviously a Guardians of the Galaxy game revealed by Square Enix. And my immediate thought, based on knowing how Square Enix did a pretty poor job with Avengers and how Avengers suffered because of some of the choices made, my immediate thought is, why is Square Enix allowed to make any more Marvel games? Why are they allowed to touch Marvel property? First off, the Guardians of the Galaxy game ran like trash. That game did not look good. I'm now falling for it again. Avengers, I gave a chance to. I still have the PS5 version here. I don't even play it anymore. Even with Spider-Man, my favorite Marvel hero, my favorite character. For those of you that know me and know how much love I have for Spider-Man, you understand and know that I play pretty much anything Spider-Man related. Or where Spider-Man's included, I mean. And I'm not even looking forward to that on Avengers. I'll probably watch the trailer. That Wakanda expansion that's coming out, that looks pretty good, but I'm not playing it. It looks all right. But that Guardians game, oh man. Wow. There's a lot to say about that. There just really is. I really don't understand. It was running really choppy. It's also coming to the Switch, which is even more backwards in thinking. I don't even get that decision. It's going to be a cloud version of the game, which, unless that Nintendo Switch Pro supposed to be announced this week is somehow still going to release, I think that's the only way that game would be able to run at a decent frame rate. But the game looked like a mobile game. And granted, I think they made the right decision in making it a single-player game. But at a $70, $60 price point, I'm not touching that game with a 10-foot pole. If it comes to Game Pass, I'll play it. But Square Enix, in my opinion, doesn't have the right engine for those types of characters. When you look at Insomniac and the way they've built their world, and then you look at Square Enix and the way they've built their own world, I get it. Two different studios. Build it how you see it. But man, does it look bad. It was funny because I had a friend of mine call the Avengers game, it looked like the Great Value, which Great Value, for those of you that know, is a Walmart brand. So it was like the knockoff version of a lot of characters. And the Avengers game had a lot of potential too, but Kamala Khan is my favorite character in it, and it was only because of her character development. She's my favorite character based on the campaign that I played, which is pretty much the only thing I played on it. But overall, I really don't know why Square Enix is allowed, and I know it's Eidos Montreal that's doing this game, but I really don't think it looks like they're adding their Tomb Raider engine to create characters within that. And Tomb Raider, as fun as those games have been for me, Tomb Raider has her own look and it worked for that. And I think the only character that really sticks out to me that looks comic book accurate, and it's not even about the comic book accuracy, I don't even want them to be an MCU lookalike. I don't. I wanted it to be its own thing, kind of like how Insomniac did their own thing as well. They didn't have anything to do with the MCU. Yeah, you got an MCU suit, you got the Sam Raimi suits, you got those things, but a suit in a world looking like a movie or giving you vibes of like a movie that just didn't do well within the Marvel universe, that just doesn't cut it for me. I just don't like it. That's why I was never really a fan of movie tie-in video games. I never really enjoyed them. I think I only played Spider-Man 3 and Spider-Man 1 because, once again, I love Spider-Man. And Spider-Man 2 is the best one out of all of them because of the free, the webbing and how realistic it was, with the webbing. But it's not something I ran to get. I think I got those games all the time when they were like $10 and just tried them out. And most of the time, I think Spider-Man 1 was the only one I finished, and Spider-Man 3, which was probably the worst one of all, especially on the Wii. I was playing on the Wii. And the campaign on the Wii and the campaign on the 360 were two different things. The next-gen consoles got way better campaigns than the Wii console did. And it was night and day, trust me. So back to the Guardians debacle. I just don't think this game's gonna do well. I'd be surprised if it got a 7 out of 10. And I'm shocked. I hope they turn it around. It's releasing this year in October, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So October seems like a very packed month. But I'm just not looking forward to it, guys. I'm just not. I don't know what it is that they're trying to do. Peter Quill, Star-Lord looks weird. Drax looks like they made him sound, or attempted to make him sound like Batista's Drax. And I think it was like their opportunity to actually make him Drax from the comics and maybe a little bit more serious with some of the comedic side. I understand that when the MCU movies are a success, the comics are kind of altered to kind of fit within that universe and give the readers that same vibe because it worked within the movies. But with video games, that doesn't always translate well. And they really need, I feel like they really missed an opportunity here. And yeah, you have Cosmo the dog, and you have, from the trailer, you have all these other characters that are not that were in the MCU or were not, or weren't even in the comics. They're brand new characters from what I read. But I think really Gamora is the only one that looks like a comic that looks good to me, in my opinion. Gamora's character model is the only one that looks good. They tried a little bit too hard with Rocket, in my opinion. Groot is just Groot. Drax looks horrendous, and Star-Lord just I don't even know what to say about that one, but he looks like they used the character model for Captain America and Avengers and just gave him a nice little wolf cut, which, if you guys know, it's the shaved sides with just the top, and it's just not looking good. So I'll move on before I cry, because with Marvel games, I'm a big Marvel Comics fan, and I really enjoy when they bring new entries video game wise. But Spider-Man seems Marvel's Spider-Man through Insomniac seems to be the only one that's really hit a home run, both its side entries and its main entries, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Spider-Man 2 is going to bring to the table. So that's two of the boo-boos from E3 right there. So there's the Guardians, there's the Gearbox conference, there's the Capcom, whatever the heck that was. Really, whatever the heck that was. I don't know why. I don't know why they even did anything. I think the only thing that came out that was great about that, and it wasn't even anything crazy, was just that they announced that they're working on Resident Evil Village DLC, which I think is great because I really enjoyed Resident Evil Village, and I think it ended on a cliffhanger in my opinion. So I'm looking forward to see what they do. But other than that, I just don't care about Phoenix Wright, Ace Attorney. I don't play Monster Hunter enough. I'm not saying it's a bad game. I just don't play Monster Hunter enough to care about it. I play it with some of my buddies, but if Jesse heard me, he'd probably kill me for this. But it's one of those games that I have to be in the mood to really play. It's not something I play on my own. I usually play with other friends. So I'm not really invested in the Monster Hunter world that much. And then they capped it off with talking about their esports endeavors, which made no sense. I'm pretty sure that's not a highlight in anybody's day. I don't need to see two other guys fighting each other in a tournament, which, to each their own. I'm not big into Street Fighter, into at least buying them. I know I play them, but I don't buy them. I'll go out of my way to go buy the new Street Fighter game. But nonetheless, Capcom, I have no clue what they were trying to do. I have no clue. I don't know why they even attempted to do it. They could have just released that once again on their Facebook and just said, hey, this is what we have, guys, and not have wasted a slot in E3. But hey, to each their own. If you enjoyed that, that's on you. But for me, that was a blunder and a half. I really don't know what they were trying to do with that. And there was no need for it. There just really wasn't. There was no need for that. The Resident Evil DLC, even the Resident Evil DLC announcement could have easily been a Facebook post. It's their conference was the epitome of this could have been an email. So that's great to know that that could have been an email and not a whole half hour or 15 minutes, whatever it was. It wasn't even that long, which was even funnier. So that's another boo-boo. And I'm going to end with this one. I'm going to end today's show with this one. Nintendo, you showed me Breath of the Wild 2. I love you for that. I love you for showing me that teaser. Metroid Dread, thank you. I'm not big on Metroid, but thank you. But there's one thing that I will point out, and it's something that Eiji Onuma actually confirmed. There will be no other entries besides for those of you guys that have seen it, there's a Game & Watch Zelda. It's like a Zelda like micro Game Boy. It's a Game & Watch. Not even a console, it's just a small Game Boy type thing. It's a Game & Watch for Zelda that will have Zelda 1, the original Zelda, Zelda 2, and then Zelda Link's Awakening from the Game Boy. Now, I told my wife this as soon as I remembered when I was writing down my notes, and I told her, I said, they just put 3 games that I could play on the Virtual Console on the Switch on a Game & Watch. And I get it, if you're a collector, I know you love those. The Mario one, a lot of people bought. People enjoy them. They enjoy them as collector's items. Some people just enjoy them to just have the nostalgia. Some people enjoy them just to have them. But 3 games that I can play on my Switch on a TV. Second, Eiji Onuma said that after that, there are no other planned entries for Zelda this year besides the Skyward Sword HD remake. And some DLC that got announced for the Hyrule Warriors. On the 35th anniversary of Zelda, the 35th, which if you remember, last year was Mario's. And Mario, in a pandemic year, got a plethora of announcements. We got a bunch of stuff from Mario. We got clothing lines. We had the Wii U remake of the Super Mario 3D World. We had so many things for Zelda. Heck, Pokemon is getting more of a better treatment this year. Excuse me, for Mario, not for Zelda. But Pokemon is also getting a better treatment than Zelda this year. Pokemon's 25th anniversary. And Katy Perry even sang for them. Post Malone did a virtual concert with Pokemon floating around him. We're getting 2 remakes for Diamond and Pearl. And we're getting Pokemon Arceus next year. Or Arceus. I always say that wrong. So sorry. The beginning of next year. Yet here we are. Zelda's 35th anniversary. A game that is at the top of the echelon for Nintendo. It's up there with Pokemon. And I will say Pokemon sells more, of course. And Mario does too. But it's still up there. I would say it's the top 3 at Nintendo. That's my personal opinion. Alongside Super Smash Brothers. And that you can throw that in any order you want. But I think top 4, I would say those 4. Because Super Smash Brothers sells like hotcakes as well. But one of your flagship franchises, and all you do is give it a Game & Watch, a Skyward Sword HD remake, which is fine because I never played Skyward Sword and I'm looking forward to it in July. I'm definitely going to give you my impressions on that once that releases. And you cap it off with a Game & Watch. I'm not going to lie to you, I was a little bit upset. I mean, I understand you have a Skyward Sword HD remake releasing. Maybe it's too much to ask for Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and Twilight Princess, or Wind Waker, whichever ones you want to throw in there. Just like they did for 3D All-Stars, for Mario 3D All-Stars. I know it's too much to probably ask for those things, but I wouldn't even care if it was just the Virtual Console ROMs thrown onto a cartridge. Just to know that I have those games on the Switch would have made my day. Would have made my 35th anniversary for Zelda. And yet, I'm sorry, but they dropped the ball hard. And I'm very disappointed because now as a Zelda fan, that being my number 1 franchise I gravitate to, it's that and Pokemon for me on Nintendo. I like Mario. I play all of the Mario entries for the most part. I really enjoyed Odyssey. I loved it. But Mario is, I would say, third for me. It's not my immediate go-to game. Zelda is, because as you guys know, it just resonates with me. I just love Zelda. And to have a 35th anniversary that's so lackluster, they dropped the ball big time. And I get it. We're still recovering from a pandemic. I may sound like a first world problem spoiled gamer. But at the end of the day, Zelda does put some respect on Zelda's name. You know what I'm saying? Put some respect on it. And I really don't feel like they put any respect on it for Zelda. So here's hoping that hopefully, even though it's not an anniversary year, sometime next year they release something before Breath of the Wild 2, even though I highly doubt it. But I'm really hoping that something comes out of this. So without a further ado, guys, those are all my thoughts on the E3 aftermath as everything came to a close on the 15th. Thank you guys for listening. As always, I love to interact with each and every one of you. I hope that you guys comment on this YouTube video. Make sure that you go to our YouTube channel under D-Pad Connect and you like and you share and subscribe. Let some friends know that, hey, we have a cool community page on Facebook under D-Pad Connect as well, where we can interact with one another and we're able to just let you know what's going on with the podcast itself. And last but not least, remember that you can always listen to us on the Anchor app or on anchor.com. And you can find our podcast every single Friday when it's uploaded there. Remember that Anchor is the podcast distributor that has it immediately. As soon as I hit upload and it's uploaded, it's there. Spotify takes a few days, but it does get to Spotify eventually. And then we also have our Google Podcast under D-Pad Connect as well. So if you're into Google Podcast, just search us up, D-Pad Connect, and you'll find us there as well. So without further ado, guys, thank you guys for listening to this episode. I hope that you guys are doing well. I hope that you guys are gaming on. I hope that you guys are watching some cool anime or watching some good shows. Loki's out. We're going to talk about that as well. Loki episode 2 is out as of today. So I'll be kind of giving you my full thoughts once the whole series is over. But so far I've enjoyed what I've watched, excuse me. So looking forward to talking to you guys about Loki and about any other anime, comic book, or video game related news or even pop culture. But remember, as always, guys, to be well and continue to nerd on. I'll see you guys on the next one.